Hey there, I'm Chief Meteorologist Jason Smith with an update on what's happening with Hurricane Milton, a system that has been gathering strength again today. It was down a little in its intensity, but still an incredible hurricane in the morning hours today. And then starting this afternoon, we started to see the pressure fall, and now it has the intensity of 165 mile per hour winds. It's a Cat 5 on the Saffir-Simpson scale, and pressure is down to 905. That is very low barometric pressure, and typically as the pressure falls, the winds will increase. Sometimes there's a little delay here, so we'll see what happens as we get closer to that next advisory, which will be down at 10 o'clock, but we have the 7 o'clock numbers right now, so I'm going to go ahead and pull that up and show you what's happening here with Milton. All right, so Milton we've seen some changes in the structure of the storm today as it's been crossing the southern Gulf of Mexico. And what's happened here is it's gone through an eye wall replacement cycle. That's completely normal for storms that are especially Category 3 and greater, but even more so with 4s and 5s. And what that's doing is once that eye wall cycle is complete, you'll see the potential for the storm to strengthen. And then if it goes into another eye wall replacement cycle, you'll see a little weakening, and then you'll see it come back up. So there are fluctuations with intensity with these eye wall replacement cycles. Right now, it's a classic Cat 5 hurricane. I really don't see anything slowing it down. It's a very symmetrical storm. The deep ring of convection pretty much enshrouds the entire outer portion of the eye wall. And the storm is still small and compact, and that's one of the things that's allowed it to intensify so quickly. Now, if you can remember, Hurricane Katrina was about 3 times the size, and that was a system that had tremendous devastation. This storm will grow in size. So the size of a hurricane makes a big difference. A bigger storm creates more surge, more issues, and the Saffir-Simpson scale does not account for size. It only accounts for the maximum sustained winds. It's a very limited scale, but on that scale it's a 5, so it's the worst you could have. And it is tracking towards west central Florida. We think it'll make landfall there tomorrow night. So there's not a whole lot of time, maybe a little more time tomorrow morning for folks to prepare. And a lot of places there are evacuations going on already. This is the water vapor loop. It shows very dry air over the western Gulf. This storm is moving to the east enough that it's been able to kind of stay away from that shear and that dry air, but we do have a new trough digging in, which will ultimately begin to weaken the system. And that may happen about the time it's coming to shore, but it really won't matter because the surge that it brings is going to be more reflective what the storm is doing 24 hours and 12 hours before landfall. And if it's still a pretty high-end storm around a Category 4 with a growing wind field, it's likely going to be a big surge maker for places that haven't seen a direct hit from a hurricane, especially one coming in from this angle from the west or from the southwest. And looking at Milton right now, 165 mile per hour Category 5, pressure is at 902. So the pressure is falling again. It is now down close to where the pressure was last night when we had winds at 180, so I would expect the winds to come up as the pressure has fallen. Unfortunately, it's moving east-northeast at 10. It's way to the south. There is a little upper-level cloudiness and some outflow over the Gulf. We're not even going to see any rain out of this. Our only issue will be rip currents, and it's pretty far away, so it may be a little bit less on the rip current scale than what we're seeing. And the storm has wobbled a little bit more to the east than the models were suggesting and that the predictions from the National Hurricane Center have shown, and they're showing a marked northeasterly turn. With this easterly wobble, we'll get another update at 10. The further east it goes, the more it may be an issue a little south of Tampa. We'll see. Tampa's still in the cone. So I want to zoom in on that cone. I'm going to bring it up full here for you so you can see it in detail if you've got friends or relatives here or you're familiar with the area. Tampa is now on the northern end of the cone, and the most intense impacts will be where the center crosses ashore and to the south of there. So if that happens, we may see a little less intensity there right around Tampa Bay, and it may be more of a problem for places like Bradenton and Sarasota and down to Port Charlotte and some areas a little closer to Cape Coral and Fort Myers. So This is going to be really interesting to see how it plays out. We just won't know until it gets really close exactly where it's going to come ashore. But the center of the track is right over Sarasota. The Inglewood area would be hard hit because you're going to get the south wind on that side. If it takes a more northerly track, it would be a big problem for Tampa Bay. Could see issues all the way up to Tarpon Springs there in the cone also. But this is getting down around Boca Grande too, and the Port Charlotte area. So other areas that could be directly hit by the system. Just wanted to do a little zoom in there and show you sea surface temperatures. So right off the tip of the Yucatan, the water's not typically as hot. It's crossed and intensified in an area where you've got some low 80 water temperatures, but it's about to go over the Gulf Loop Current, which is an area where we see high oceanic heat content. There's a little tongue of that coming up off the tip of Cuba, and so that's not a good situation. The current ranking of this thing with winds at 165, it is well within the Category 5 frameworks, and it's the highest it gets as far as the Saffir-Simpson wind scale. All right, the forecast track. The models, most of them are clustered in the center of this cone. The initialization of the models is based on where the storm is, and you can see it's already a little south of where most of those storms initialize. Initialization is where the storm, what's the starting point for the models. A lot of these initialize a little north, so that'll be interesting to see how that is weighed in, because it's going to follow the same style track, but if it initializes further south, or the storm south of the model guidance, then that's going to change the ultimate outcome. And the error of the track could be easily 60 miles either way of the center line of the track. Just don't know where it's going to come ashore yet. All residents in the path need to prepare. Of course, that does not include our part of the Gulf Coast. We've got a nice dry air front that's come through. This is the graph Futurecast. It did a great job with Helene, and it actually outperformed some of the best models, the global models. So I'd have to say this is one of the best models too. And this is our in-house model. And so looking at it, we've got it coming in very close to Tampa Bay. High tide is around 2 a.m. And we got this storm coming in around 12, so it's going to be close enough to high tide that it will probably be a tidal influence that would amplify the impacts. And even if it starts to crumble and the bottom half of the storm starts falling apart, we do have the potential for major storm surge because of what the storm's doing prior to landfall and creating wave heights and swell. And then we have it moving out into the Atlantic by 2 p.m. This is the GFS model, pretty similar outcome. Remember, these models may have initialized a little too far to the north, so the track may be a little north of what ultimately happens. We'll see. Tampa Bay certainly could be hit in a horrible way, and it moves over Orlando and then pushes out into the Atlantic on Thursday and into Friday. Note the wind field here. So the storm's pretty compact right now, but starting Wednesday afternoon, we're going to see this wind field expand, and it'll actually double in size. And the hurricane force wind field will also probably double in size. And that larger wind field means more widespread impacts for Central Florida. We could see tropical storm force winds as far south as Fort Lauderdale and Miami and into the Everglades, and as far north as Lake City and Jacksonville. And the hurricane force winds will be more widespread. Even though the winds are going down, the overall field of the winds will be increasing. So that has to be weighed in. You have to think about impacts and not just the maximum sustained winds and what category it is. I mean, it's really more, that was the biggest takeaway we had from Hurricane Katrina, was that it really needed to be more of an impact-based presentation when we talk about the weather and track tropical systems. This is a look at one of those possible impacts besides wind. This is the possibility of storm surge 10 to 15 feet. And it's really anywhere from south of Fort Myers all the way up north of Tampa. We could see significant storm surge. And Sarasota is kind of right in the middle of that. And this is a highly populated part of Florida's coast. Venice, Sarasota, there are tons of neighborhoods here. There are a lot of waterfront communities here, so it's a very vulnerable area to surge. Temperatures in the low 60s tonight in our local area, so we've got some cool fall air settling in. Tomorrow morning at 62 in Mobile, Pensacola at 68. We're at 64 in Crestview and inland spots. We'll see some upper 50s tomorrow morning. It'll be a little cool in Thomasville and Coffeyville, but not bad. 60 in Jackson and 63 in Bruton. Our extended forecast, 50s at night. Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night will be some of the coolest weather we've seen so far this fall. And daytime highs will be in the low 80s over the weekend, so it's going to be incredibly comfortable. And next week we could get another shot of cool, dry air into the area. So as you would expect, the seasons are finally changing. This will help with the risk of Hurricane Milton and future systems as water temperatures start to drop, but hurricane season's still not over, obviously, as we're tracking a major monster storm in the Gulf, and we expect to see more where that came from with this system getting closer to Florida tomorrow and then crossing the Florida Peninsula tomorrow night with possible landfall sometime around midnight. We're going to be updating the forecast on our Fox 10 weather app, and I'll be on Fox 10 News tonight at 9. And we also have our morning show tomorrow morning, so you want to tune in for the latest. Meteorologist Matt Barentine will have an update there. Thanks for joining us here on this extended update on what's happening with Hurricane Milton.